This is the I'm Possible Project show, where we interview real people who have achieved incredible feats in the face of overwhelming odds, showing that impossible is just a state of mind and that anything is possible. I'm your host, Joshua Rivedal. Today, in episode 9, Pain with a Purpose, I talk to Barb Smith. Let's jump right in. I am with my friend Barb Smith, and I've gotten to know Barb over the past few years through a variety of channels, and she is the founder and facilitator of the Saginaw Survivors of Suicide, which has been supporting families left behind after suicide for the past 25 years. Pretty impressive. Barb has received training and certifications from numerous experts in the field of suicide prevention, intervention, and the aftermath of suicide, including Bill Steele, Iris Bolton, AFSP, or also known as the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and AAS, which is the American Association of Suicidology. She has been recognized as the Saginawian of the Year, and in 2003, she received the Volunteer of the Year Award from United Way. Barb, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I think you are way more than that 60 to 100-word bio, whatever it was that I read off and that I introduced you at. So I think our listeners are curious. I know I'm curious. I know I don't know everything. You did write a story for us in our First Time Possible book, which is quite incredible. But we want to know more about Barb, where you've been, where you're going. Give us that Barb Smith experience, please and thank you.
Sure. When my brother John took his life at the age of 20, I started my grief journey and my journey to the life I now live as a suicide prevention, intervention, and aftercare advocate. I was 18 years old then, and on my journey through grief, I have started our Survivors of Suicide support group, which supports families left behind after a loss to suicide. And in doing that, I thought, well, I can sit around this table and, support those bereaved by suicide, or I can get some education, trainings, and start working in prevention and awareness. So through that, I am doing Yellow Ribbon throughout Michigan, which is the youth suicide prevention in the schools and community. I'm also doing Assist and Safe Talk for suicide intervention for people around the state and country. And then I also enjoy doing the aftercare, which could be reaching out to families immediately in the immediate hours of a loss to suicide, as well as training the first responders in supporting the families in a more healthy and a way of helping and healing instead of hurting. So in a nutshell, we're doing a lot of work here locally, statewide, and nationwide.
And I'm incredibly grateful for your work. I know when I lost my dad to suicide in 2009, we had nothing like that. We had no aftercare. We had nobody educating the first responders. We had nobody come over to the house. That wasn't even an option. And I think my grief and recovery process would have looked a lot different, a lot better had I had that experience. And so just want to say off the bat that I'm grateful for what you do. You mentioned your loss, the loss of your brother John to suicide. And losing someone to suicide is one of the biggest obstacles I think a person can face. There's so many questions. There's just so much in that can of worms that's hard to predict and even overcome. How did you get through that process of losing him and grieving and rebounding and anything else that you went through? How did that go, and how did you overcome?
Well, that's a good question. I had a conversation with the funeral director today about the unique grief to suicide. Not that it's different that it's worse than any other loss to, a loss of a loved one through death, but it becomes very complicated. And I think my biggest obstacle was finding forgiveness for what I didn't know. And I'd like to say that I didn't overcome my obstacles, but I learned to walk through it and to learn to help other people, which, again, the story that I wrote, for your book was it gave purpose and value to my pain. Suicide grief is so unique in itself. Losing someone through any cause of death is hurtful and painful, but it's very much complicated. And I guess what I had to learn is if there wasn't help out there, like you said, Josh, there was no help. People didn't want to talk about it. We became this family of this secret. And I learned that if we don't talk about it, it's going to keep happening. So my obstacle was really forgiving myself for what I didn't know, but also learning to help and teach others warning signs, risk factors, and teaching people the tools of how to help if you have a concern for someone. And that's what I did with my grief.
So you channeled it into something positive, something greater than yourself, something bigger than your grief.
Because one of our sayings is suicide doesn't have to, it can change you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. And it sounds like, we become self-destructive oftentimes when we have all this hurt or pain, we don't know what to do with it. And it can turn to alcohol, substance abuse, a lot of negative behaviors, which then in turn destroys other parts of your life.
Absolutely. And I can speak to that experience. Was nothing super heavy, but was drinking and drugging a little bit after I lost my dad, and life just kind of got a little out of control to the point where I nearly attempted to take my life almost 2 years after I lost my dad. So without the work that you're doing in the aftercare, things kind of can look like that. And suicide doesn't have to destroy you. It will change the course of your life forever. And I find it interesting that one of your biggest obstacles was overcoming the guilt of not knowing, you don't know what you don't know. That's what somebody told me once, because I didn't know how to save my dad. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know. And that was a really difficult process. How did you find the capacity to forgive yourself? What did that look like? Did you have a mentor? Was that somebody came into your life? Was that research? What did that look like?
I think it was a multiple of things. I think it sounds very simple, but I think timing was one. But it's what I did with my time in my grief. And it was more educating myself. I went to conferences. I read everything I could. I connected with other survivors of suicide loss. And one of the things that we now know in people who are in this field are, we can't save everyone. But what we can do is we can prevent about 95% of suicides if we do know what to do. Right. And when I educated myself and I realized it wasn't just that moment that my brother decided to take his life, right, that there had to have been other times in his life that we found out afterwards. I also had to realize that a lot of people go through breakups and divorce. A lot of people get laid off from jobs. And just to realize that it was his perception of his life. It wasn't what we viewed. It isn't what we saw in his life. It's what he saw. It's what he believed about his life. And if that famous saying is if love could have saved him, he never would have died, right?
Right.
None of us wanted this for him, but it's what he believed was his only out, and we know differently. There's so many other ways that we can get through life challenges. There's a lot of help out there. We just have to encourage people to use it. Yes,
we do. We need to encourage and we need to point people in the direction of what help looks like to them. We all need support, and in different ways, family, friends, clergy. And I think a lot of times people don't know what to say or how to provide that help or how to provide that listening ear or how to usher to professional help. And so that's definitely a big challenge. And the power of education is incredibly important. What would you say one of the most important components of education is or should be when talking about suicide and suicide prevention?
I think it's just using the word suicide and asking very directly if you have a concern about someone. Don't be afraid to ask, are you having thoughts of suicide? Or, is life just so hard that you think death is the only way out? I think when people allude to death or suicide or killing themselves, most of us dance around it because it becomes uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And if we can just let people know it's no different than CPR, right? You recognize somebody's having some physical changes or behavior changes, we immediately start asking them physical questions. And if someone is having thoughts of suicide, majority of the people, more times than not, will show some type of signs. We recognize behavior changes, we just don't know exactly what it might be. And no one ever wants to believe suicide is the thought. So we just dismiss it. We avoid it because it's uncomfortable. So the important part is when you can have a concern about someone's behavior change or what they're saying is to ask them, what does this mean? Or what are you saying? Are you talking about suicide? Because people want to talk about it. people don't want to feel that way. They want, they want someone to help them understand those thoughts.
Agreed. And I think they want to talk about it, and when they do, it's usually veiled in something else. It's not, in my experience, it's not usually like, I want to die or I want to take my life. It's kind of like, I'm a burden, or it'd be better off if I wasn't here. It's not always the S word that people say. And to kind of maybe add to what your thoughts and the importance of educating people on being okay to ask the question. I almost feel like one of the other things that we need to do, because you mentioned, we notice, when somebody has a sprain or a cut, we know what to look for. We ask the question. So to me, it's almost, I think one of the biggest maybe thought processes that can and needs to permeate this movement, the suicide prevention movement, is juxtaposing the brain against the body, the physical and the mental, because you're like, okay, so you go to see a doctor, professional, or you talk about if you got a cut or a sprain or maybe even prostate cancer. But why not, if you suspect you may have depression or other mental illness, or even if you're thinking of suicide, there's nothing to be ashamed about that. You're not ashamed of your cut or your cancer or your this or your that. And there's no separation between body and mind. It's all one. It's all holistic. And so if we can get out of that, I think get out of that process, that thought process that, oh, my brain is separate than my body and I'm crazy if I'm thinking, and no, you're not crazy. You do need help. But I think it's really, really important, as you say, to make sure that we educate folks on, it's okay to say the word. It's okay to say the word. It's okay to ask the question. And then let's talk about keeping them grounded and ushering them to professional help. With your experience with your brother and losing him, that's obviously one of the biggest lemons that life could give you. Very sour. It's one of the worst experiences I've ever been through, probably the worst. And so I'm curious, though, how, and you've kind of already stated it, but I kind of want it very explicit, because I see the work you're doing and know what's going on, and maybe there's other things that I can't see or I don't know about, but your brother's passing is a lemon, and you've turned that lemon into some lemonade. And what does that lemonade look like? What is that recipe? Is it helping people? Is it this? Is it that? What is your recipe for the lemonade that you've created from your brother's passing? Obviously, you'd rather have your brother here, but unfortunately he's passed, but you've certainly created an interesting life and an interesting platform and lots of good in the world. So walk us through what that looks like, the lemonade that you've created from that situation.
Well, I think that sometimes people use the saying that everything happens for a reason. I've somewhat challenged that quote to say that, I've had to find a purpose for my pain, and I need to make meaning out of this meaningless death. And one of the speakers, I think it was at your book, opening of the book, when I was in New York, where I believe it's one of your speakers said, when we stop speaking their name, the person just dies. When we speak their name, they will continue to live. And that's what I chose to do, is to just not let my brother die, but to honor who he was in life by giving to others the way he used to give, by using a sense of humor, by sharing laughter with others, by making a difference and taking my life experience and sharing it, not to focus just on his death, but to honor who he was in his life. And if I stop teaching, I think that, and someday I will, we'll leave that up to you, Josh, for the years to come. That'll be your journey. But I think that it's important to honor the people who've died by honoring not, all the gifts that they left us. Iris Bolton, a wonderful author and pioneer really in the world of suicide and the aftermath, always says that our loved ones left us many gifts. Yes, they left us lemonades. They left a lot of pain, things that they just hurt. But there was more to my brother John than his death. And if I don't make change, if I don't make a meaning, then his death was really meaningless. So that's how I live my life. And I've met wonderful, wonderful people on this journey. I'm sorry he has died. I wish for, every moment he could be here to see my kids, my grandkids. He stopped aging at age of 20, and I keep aging. But, he was an amazing person. And to keep his life alive, to keep his story alive, is to keep sharing it, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's what I find folks doing when their healing journey and their grief journey starts to tick upward. When it's not an easy thing to manage. Let's go there first. But when you make meaning of that person's life, life and continue to do so. Their legacy lives on. The waves that rocked you and when you first lost him or lose that person or what have you, they spread out a little bit. And so you're not always on this, you're not always on this ship that feels like it's going to capsize at any moment. And that's just my personal experience. And there's a little bit of research that I've been collaborating with a partner on. And so we're trying to, we're learning about the grief journey. But I love how much you've done in John's name and in his honor. And really, in my opinion, I do this in my father's name, but I also am spreading the love. I'm doing this for the forgotten, for that person who truly did die alone or conceivably thought they died alone, and letting them know somewhere, somehow that we don't forget about you. And we want to make sure that others don't suffer the same fate, as it were, because you don't have to.
Do you remember when no one talked about suicide? And I mean, I just am amazed that we never thought people would talk openly and outwardly about suicide. We couldn't get into the schools. We couldn't get into communities and talk about suicide because they thought if we talked about it, it would make it happen. And I think when we talk about our impossibles and making them our possibilities, think about what we've done in honor of the people that we lost and to really make meaning of their death, which is really who they were in life and death. And if we think about what you and myself and hundreds and thousands of other peoples around this country who are doing suicide awareness work, we are now getting so many bookings to come into the schools and community because people now know that they want the tools, they want to learn, they want to help, they just were never taught. So just the fact that you are getting these bookings all over the country and world, and people want to learn now. So we have made an impact. We've made an impact on the people who are here. We've made changes. We're making a difference. And my brother did make a difference. And I also lost my sister-in-law to suicide since. And, we talked about that in the book, that even when we try, we do our best, we make a difference. There's just some people, that I wasn't able to help. And that was a hard lesson to learn. That was a hard lesson to learn is, we have to do something. Doing nothing is not helpful.
We can't bury our heads in the sand. We just can't. And you said something about we can't save everybody. And maybe we can't. And that's why, in my head, we need more allies because, Barb, you're going to reach people that I can't reach, and I'm going to reach people that you can't reach. And sometimes we'll be able to cross over. Sometimes we won't. Sometimes we can't. But the more irons in the fire that we have, I really do believe at some point we could get it down to zero. But we need more allies who aren't connected to the movement. My friend Heather Williams, who is actually in our second book, she has zero connection to suicide, zero connection to losing someone or to having made an attempt. No one in her close family, no one in her close circle. And she does work in mental health and mental illness as a drug and alcohol counselor. But the fact that she has no skin in the game, as it were, gives me such great hope that eventually this is going to keep moving forward. And we're going to have walks as big as the breast cancer Komen walks and that kind of stuff, which are very valid and incredible. But we need that for us. And the other thing I want to just thank you for is bringing to light what we have done and what we have accomplished, because we have so much work to do, and not just you and me, but all of us. And I've been in the thick of this for 6 years, you over 25 at this point, and we see the numbers increasing, and there's lots of different reasons for it. And our methodologies, I can only speak for you and I, are doing what they're supposed to do, and they're working and saving lives. And there's lots of other things out there that maybe aren't doing as much, or we're just not reaching. There's a lot of gaps to fill. But I want to thank you for saying that, because we need to be reminded that we are doing good, even though the numbers are going up. And so we need to dig in for sure.
Well, so you talked about zero suicide, Josh, and I think I would love to have all your listeners out there to go to their government, to go to their community commissioners and mayors and hospitals and anywhere they can knock on doors and ask them to implement something like zero suicide, where, we tell people to go to your ER, we tell them to go to your primary care physicians, we encourage them to go for help. And the problem is they don't have a lot of trainings. Not all people in the health field have trainings to understand how to help. So zero suicide, which you've alluded to a few times, is what we're doing here in the Great Lakes Bay region in Michigan. And that is where all three major hospitals are going to be training their staff, and they will be encouraging people in our community. And our goal is, if you are trained in CPR, which is a a life-saving effort, then you should be trained in some type of suicide awareness program. When someone is, having a heart attack, we don't stand there and watch and wait for the surgeons to come, right? We start doing things to help save their life in those few moments while we hand them off to the medical professionals. Mm-hmm. So the Zero Suicide Initiative is really about opening up your workplace, your agencies, your schools, your hospitals to mandate all people be trained in suicide awareness. If you're a school teacher, you have to be trained in CPR, correct?
Most places, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you work at a local grocery store or some people in department stores, someone in the store has to be trained in CPR. Why do we not have to have the same training so that we can help our coworkers, help our customers, help our family members? If we can prevent suicides one at a time, you're right, we can reach zero suicide, but it's going to take a whole community, and it starts with one person with one voice to make it happen.
One spark that lights the fire to change the world. And
we're doing it here in the Great Lakes Bay region. So if anyone here is in Michigan, we're doing a huge initiative across Michigan. So, jump on the wagon and see what we can't do.
Wonderful. And we do need that. We need more workplace initiatives, churches, schools, government contracts, first responders. And I'll even plug in, well, first I'll say that Zero Suicide is a fantastic program. And I know the folks who've written that and who contribute to that, and they're wonderful people. And I'm glad they exist. And I'll also say, I'll put in a little plug for the I'm Possible Project's Changing Minds programming, because we do suicide prevention, and we also discuss coping skills and support systems and living with mental illness. And we're training some hospital workers in Nebraska, and we're doing some fire department stuff and school district stuff. And so it's zero suicide plus a couple of side dishes, if I can give that analogy. So IamPossibleProject.com/changing-minds. Barb, I want to have a little fun here. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and then we'll kind of get back to you and a little bit more about the work and all that happiness. But I want to switch things up and lighten things up a little bit. This is a quick fire round, and it might be a little less quick because I like to comment and say things because I'm annoying like that. This is kind of our inside the actor studio moment, or maybe our Jimmy Fallon Tonight Show moment. So I'm going to ask you some questions. They're just fun. There's no right answers. Just a little bit of silliness so people get to know another side of Barb. So here we go. Barb, what is your favorite word?
Hope.
Hope. It's a beautiful word. And it's something that we all need. And it's a cute name, too. I like it as a name.
Maybe my next grandchild, hey?
Oh, okay. We'll see about that. Crossing fingers, you have another grandchild soon.
No, we don't. But just in case.
We're not doing that. Take that out. We're taking those vibes out. Those good vibes out. Barb, what is your least favorite word?
Hate.
Hate. That's a popular one on our show. Hate, moist, and no are some of our popular ones. I thought you were going to say hopeless or hopelessness. I thought you were just going to be a smartass and just make it an adverb. But you didn't do that to me. I dig it. Barb, if somebody made a life story, a movie, a lifetime movie of your life, who would play the title role? Who would play Barb Smith? Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Josh. I don't think there's two people like me, and I don't know if that'd be so great. Right. You'd have to ask my family about that one.
We have a humble person on the call right now, in case you're all wondering. Who could we – let me say that – all right, I know who we're going to play because I'm at my sister-in-law's house, and I'm seeing a picture of this person. Let's say Linda Carter, our once and future Wonder Woman. She will play Barb Smith in the Barb Smith Lifetime movie. I just casted it. It's a one-woman show. All right. Moving right along. I think we've got – I'm going to go two more, I think. So, Barb, who or what is your spirit animal?
Give me some options.
Let's see. Panther, aardvark, amoeba, giraffe.
Let's think about this.
Bear.
How about an elephant?
I like it.
They're so big, but yet they're gentle. It can be a huge problem in this world, but yet it can feel small. But elephants are just huge and ginormous, but yet they're the most gentle animal, right?
Yeah, and they're so cute. And they're
so cute.
And they're cute. They're huge, and they're cute, and they know how to cool themselves off. Yeah,
that's right. They're protective.
They are that too. All right, your spirit animal, elephant. I dig it. All right, last one. Here goes. If heaven exists, Barb, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you as you enter or as you get kicked out?
Nice. I think as I enter, I would like him to say he is proud of all the work that I have done and that I've led by example.
Which you have. I think you'd be a lock to have that come out of God's mouth. I would not be surprised. I hope I'm there when we get there, just so I can say this was on the podcast, God. You predicted it. Everything happens.
And if I go to get kicked out, he might say, "Barb, change that attitude."
Yeah. You wait outside for a minute. You got a 100-year timeout.
Timeout.
And you're going to be babysat by our friend Jeffrey Purgatory. So,
for a moment.
Like, I thought that was a place, not a person. Awesome. That was not the quickest of the quick fire round, but I had fun. And we learned a little bit about you. That was awesome. So, Barb, what does like the next 6 months to a year look like for you? Professionally, personally, whatever you want to fill us in. What's going down in the next 6 months to a year for you? My
personal vision is actually to do more suicide prevention and of the aftercare because of the need. Yeah. And, every time we take a call after someone has died by suicide, it somewhat breaks my spirit. So I would love, love, love to do much more prevention work. I'd like to do it on a larger scale. And, sometimes money and time holds us back from doing all the work that we want to do. Yeah. But together, honestly, Josh, whenever we do our major events, it just feels good to look out and see how many people are actually doing this work. I would love to I'm doing a lot of the Safe Talk Assist training and some, yellow ribbons. I could just talk about suicide prevention all day long and working to do the aftercare. I do have 6 grandkids, so I would love to spend more time with them. So if there's a nice balance, that would be my vision in the future, is learn to balance both life and, the life I live now and my passion.
I think you can swing that. You've made it through worse, and you could take them on a road trip to your next speaking engagement, as long as they're not missing school, I suppose. Who knows?
Second Island this weekend.
Fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Josh, I want to put a plug if I could. We're really working hard on the next generation in our Great Lakes area. We're doing a lot in the universities where we're going to be teaching students in the health and human services, nursing, physicians, social works. We're going to be doing a lot more in the universities to help teach them the skills as well. So my hope is in the next 2 years is that we just really do a robust suicide prevention people in the health field and getting into the universities.
Okay. Well, we might need to talk offline too, but you put it out in the universe and you put it on this show, and this show will be around for a very long time, at least downloadable. So that'll be great, and we can hook up offline and talk about how we could possibly make that happen between the two of us or some folks that I know. So that's great. I'm glad you put that plug in. And so if folks want to get in touch with you, Barb, to follow you, to learn more about your work, learn more about suicide prevention, whatever, what's the best way they can do that? Website, email, Facebook, what's good for you?
Sure. Well, August 6th, we are doing a Walk for Hope at Northwood University, and we should have about 1,000 people participating. And that website is crowdrise.com/walkforhope. 2017. So that would be a way to connect with us in doing a major event. So that's crowdrise.com/walkforhope 2017. Our website is Saginaw Survivors of Suicide.org, and you can link on me with that website. I haven't posted all the upcoming trainings that we're doing. Just there's so many of them, and I do need to start updating the website. But Saginaw Survivors of Suicide.org is our website, and you can cut my phone number on there if you'd like, or sosbarb@gmail.com. I would love to, be a resource for people, answer questions, thoughts, or even connect you to someone that might be of help.
Really amazing. I encourage you all to check out Barb, what she's up to. Thank you, Barb, so much for coming on the show. We so appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to the I'm Possible Project show with Joshua Rivedal and guest Barb Smith. I love sharing stories and how to turn impossible into I'm possible. If you want more inspirational stories, our second and third books are in pre-order right now. Changing minds, breaking stigma, achieving the impossible, as well as Lemonade Stand. Both contain powerful stories of overcoming tremendous odds. When life gives you lemons, squeeze, add sugar, and pick up a copy of The I'm Possible Project. www.IamPossibleProject.com/pre-order. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're more than a community. You're part of the I'm Possible family. Until next time, sending you lots of love.